For 4,500 years, the Great Pyramid of Giza has been hiding its secrets in plain sight. 2.5 million limestone blocks, each weighing an average of 2.5 tons, stacked with such precision that you can't slide a knife blade between the joints. A monument so perfectly aligned to true north that it's off by only 3/60ths of a single degree. And here's the part that keeps engineers awake at night. It was built in approximately 20 years using nothing but copper tools, wooden sledges, and human muscle. That means the ancient Egyptians had to quarry, transport, and precisely place one block every 2.5 minutes, working 10 hours a day, every single day, for 2 decades. This should be impossible. But it's not. It's just that we've only recently begun to understand how they actually did it. Stand at the base of the Great Pyramid today and try to comprehend the scale. The structure originally stood 481 feet tall, making it the tallest man-made structure on Earth for over 3,800 years. The base covers 13 acres and is so level that the difference between the highest and lowest points is less than an inch. Each side is oriented almost perfectly to the cardinal directions: north, south, east, and west. This is an approximate. This is precision that would impress modern surveyors with GPS equipment and laser levels. For centuries, people assumed the pyramids must have been built by slaves, forced labor dragging blocks up massive external ramps while overseers cracked whips. Hollywood loved this image. It fit our assumptions about ancient civilizations and absolute power. There was just one problem. It's completely wrong. Modern archaeology has discovered the workers' village, analyzed their remains, studied their tools, and reconstructed their diet. What emerges is a radically different picture of how the Great Pyramid was actually built, and it's far more interesting than the myth. Let's start with who built it. These weren't slaves. They were paid laborers, skilled craftsmen, and seasonal workers who came from all over Egypt to participate in what they considered a sacred national project. We know this because archaeologists have excavated the workers' village at Giza, finding bakeries, breweries, copper-working facilities, and even a medical center where workers received treatment for injuries. The skeletons show that these people ate, well, better than the average Egyptian. They consumed massive amounts of meat, particularly beef, which was expensive and normally reserved for the elite. Someone was feeding these workers premium rations because their labor was valuable. The workforce was enormous but organized with incredible efficiency. Herodotus, the ancient Greek historian, claimed 100,000 workers built the pyramid. Modern estimates suggest the core workforce was smaller, perhaps 20 to 30,000 permanent workers, supplemented by rotating teams of seasonal laborers who came during the Nile's flood season when agricultural work was impossible. This makes sense economically and logistically. You're not just feeding these people. You're housing them, providing tools, organizing the work, managing supply chains. 100,000 people all working simultaneously would create chaos. But 20 to 30,000 organized into specialized teams? That's manageable. The workforce was divided into large gangs with names like Friends of Khufu and Drunkards of Menkaure. These gangs were further subdivided into smaller units of maybe 200 workers, and those units were split again into teams of 10 to 20 men. Each team had specific responsibilities: quarrying, hauling placement, finishing work. There were teams of stonemasons, copper toolsmiths, rope makers, sledge builders. This was a complex, hierarchical organization that required logistics comparable to modern construction projects. So how did they actually move the stones? The external ramp theory has problems. To build a straight ramp to the pyramid summit would require a ramp over a mile long to maintain a reasonable grade. That's more material than the pyramid itself. A spiral ramp around the outside would work better, but there's no archaeological evidence for it, and it would obscure the pyramid's faces, making it impossible to check alignment as you built. Enter the internal ramp theory, which has gained significant support in recent years. French architect Jean-Pierre Houdin proposed that after building the lower portion using a short external ramp, the Egyptians constructed a spiral ramp inside the pyramid itself, running just beneath the outer casing stones. This explains several mysteries: why you don't see evidence of massive external ramps, how they maintain precision in the upper sections, and why there are certain anomalies in the pyramid's internal structure that might be remnants of these ramps. The theory gained credibility when scientists used microgravimetry and other non-invasive techniques to detect density variations in the pyramid's structure consistent with internal voids where ramps might have been. We can't excavate to confirm without damaging the monument, but the evidence is compelling. If Hodin is right, the Great Pyramid contains its own construction scaffolding, permanently entombed within its mass. But moving blocks is only part of the challenge. How did they cut them? The ancient Egyptians had copper tools, saws, chisels, and pounders. Copper is soft. Limestone is hard. This seems like an impossible mismatch, except the Egyptians were clever. They didn't rely on the copper's hardness alone. They used abrasives, probably quartz sand, creating a slurry that did the actual cutting while the copper tool just held and directed the abrasive. Experimental archaeology has proven this works. It's slow and it wears out copper tools quickly, but it works. For the harder granite stones used in the internal chambers, they use an even more ingenious technique: dolerite pounders. Dolerite is an extremely hard volcanic rock, harder than granite. By repeatedly striking granite with dolerite pounders, ancient workers could literally pulverize the granite surface, creating a depression. Do this systematically, and you can shape granite blocks with remarkable precision. It's brutally labor-intensive, which is exactly what the Egyptians had: abundant labor organized by a state that could mobilize resources on an unprecedented scale. The precision of the stone placement is extraordinary. The casing stones, the smooth outer layer that once gave the pyramid its gleaming white appearance, were fitted so tightly that the joints are nearly invisible. Modern theories suggest the stones were placed slightly rough. Then final smoothing was done in place using copper tools and abrasives. This would allow for micro adjustments to achieve those impossibly tight fits. Then there's the alignment mystery. The Great Pyramid is aligned to true north with an accuracy of 0.05 degrees. How did they achieve this without compasses? The most likely method involves stellar observation. The ancient Egyptians could have used the circular path of stars around the celestial pole to determine true north. By observing the stars' rising and setting positions and bisecting the angle, you can find north with remarkable accuracy. This requires patient observation and mathematical calculation, both of which the Egyptians excelled at. The base of the pyramid is leveled to within 1 inch across its entire 13-acre footprint. Achieving this probably involved water leveling, creating a shallow grid of channels, filling them with water, and marking the water level. Water always finds its own level due to gravity, giving you a perfectly level reference plane. Cut your foundation to match that reference, and you have a level base. Simple in concept, extraordinarily effective in practice. Let's talk about the timeline, because it's genuinely mind-bending. If the pyramid was built in 20 years and contains 2.5 million blocks, that's 125,000 blocks per year, 342 blocks per day, or 1 block every 2.5 minutes, assuming a 10-hour workday. This seems impossible until you remember multiple teams working simultaneously. If you have 40 teams placing blocks simultaneously, suddenly you only need to set 1 block per team every 100 minutes. That's challenging but achievable, especially if the blocks are already prepared, transported to staging areas, and ready for final placement. The logistics are staggering. You need constant supplies of copper for tools because they wear out quickly. You need rope, lots of rope, made from papyrus or flax. You need wooden sledges and rollers, which means timber, which had to be imported because Egypt doesn't have large forests. You need food for tens of thousands of workers, water, beer, housing, sanitation. You need a bureaucracy to organize all this, scribes to track everything, managers to coordinate the teams. The pyramid isn't just a monument to Pharaoh Khufu. It's a monument to Egyptian organizational capability and state power. Recent discoveries have revealed even more sophistication. Archaeologists found evidence of a sophisticated waterworks system at Giza, suggesting the Egyptians may have used water to help transport stones. Some theories propose that canals were dug to bring Nile water closer to construction site, allowing stones to be floated on barges part of the way. During the annual flood, water levels would have been high enough to make this feasible. There's also the question of the internal chambers. The king's chamber contains massive granite beams weighing up to 80 tons each. How were these maneuvered into position deep inside the pyramid? The internal ramp theory provided one answer, but the precision required to fit these beams into place, creating the relieving chambers that protect the king's chamber from the weight above, demonstrates engineering knowledge that rivals modern understanding. The pyramid also contains shafts, narrow passages that run from the internal chambers to the exterior. For years, people thought these were air shafts or had religious significance, pointing towards certain stars. Recent robotic exploration of these shafts has found doors with copper handles, raising more questions than answers. What's behind these doors? Why build such complex internal features? We still don't fully know. One of the most persistent myths is that we can't build the pyramids today. That's nonsense. We absolutely could build a pyramid using modern technology. What's impressive isn't that the task is impossible with modern equipment. It's that the ancient Egyptians accomplished it without that equipment. They did it with human muscle, simple machines like levers and rollers, copper tools, and most importantly, brilliant organization and engineering intuition. The Great Pyramid represents something profound about human capability. This wasn't built by an advanced lost civilization or alien visitors. It was built by people fundamentally like us, with the same intelligence and creativity, but with different tools and different priorities. They didn't have computers or power tools, but they had time, resources, and a social structure that could mobilize those resources toward a single goal. Consider what it meant to be a worker on this project. You're participating in something that will outlast you by millennia. You're part of a national enterprise, working alongside thousands of others, fed by the state, housed in workers' villages, part community with its own identity and pride. The graffiti left by work gangs inside the pyramid shows pride and competition between teams. They weren't slaves suffering under tyranny. They were skilled workers taking pride in an extraordinary achievement. The construction techniques weren't static. Evidence suggests methods evolved during the building process as workers learned and adapted. Early sections show slightly different techniques than later sections, suggesting a learning curve, trial and error, incremental improvements. The Egyptians were experimenting and innovating in real time, solving problems as they arose. Modern experiments replicating ancient techniques have been remarkably successful. Archaeologists and engineers have moved multi-ton blocks using wooden sledges and crews of workers. They've cut limestone with copper saws and sand abrasive. They've demonstrated that water poured on sand reduces friction dramatically, making blocks easier to drag. Every time someone claims the pyramids couldn't have been built with ancient methods, experimental archaeology proves them wrong. Yet mysteries remain. We still don't fully understand every aspect of the internal structure. We don't know for certain how the massive granite beams in the king's chamber were maneuvered into position. We haven't found all the quarries used for specific stones. The internal ramp theory, while compelling, isn't definitively proven. There's still work to be done, still questions to answer. What we do know is that the Great Pyramid represents the pinnacle of Old Kingdom Egyptian civilization, a moment when state organization, engineering knowledge, and available resources aligned to create something unprecedented. It took the development of copper tools, advances in stone working, sophisticated surveying techniques, and a social structure capable of mobilizing tens of thousands of workers. Remove any one of these elements, and the project becomes impossible. The pyramid isn't just a tomb for Pharaoh Khufu. It's a statement. We can do this. We can move mountains. We can create something that will outlast empires and survive millennia. And they were right. Long after the Egyptian empire fell, long after their language was forgotten and their gods abandoned, the pyramid stands, still keeping most of its secrets, still challenging us to understand how human beings 4,500 years ago accomplished something so extraordinary that people struggled to believe it was possible. But it was possible. It happened. And understanding how they did it doesn't diminish the achievement. It makes it even more impressive.